watching the rise. And I wouldn't say I'm shocked cause I'm hardly surprised. This one's for the ride. This one's for who knew I'd make it, just needed some time. This one's for my wife. Could have left 1,000 times just about myself.
Hey, what's up, everyone? My name is Randy Kaye, and I'm the host of the Caught Up podcast. Today we have Coach Mike Candrea, one of the most iconic names in the history of college softball. He spent 36 seasons at the University of Arizona, building one of the most dominant programs we've ever seen. We're talking about 1,674 wins, 8 national championships, and 24 trips to the Women's College World Series. And that's just on the college side. On the international stage, he led Team USA to Olympic gold in 2004, going 9-0, one of the most dominant performances in Olympic softball history. And he followed that up with a silver medal in 2008, where the Team USA went undefeated in pool play before falling to Japan 3-1 in the gold medal game. But beyond the numbers, Coach Candrea is a teacher, a leader, and a pioneer. His impact on the game goes way beyond wins and losses, and I'm honored to sit down with him today. Coach, it's always great to see you. Thanks for taking the time to catch up.
Well, thanks for having me.
You're welcome. How are you doing today?
Well, I'm doing great. I got a tea time about 1 o'clock today, so that's kind of been my thing recently. Still working at the university as a special advisor to the athletic director, so I'm still doing some coach mentoring and some leadership training, but it gives me a chance to spend a little bit of my retirement time doing what I love to do, and that's play golf.
Play golf, yeah. I was going to ask you how much time you spend down there. What is the special assistant job entail? You said kind of coach mentoring, things like that. Do you sit in on meetings and just kind of give your opinion and your thoughts on the program and different aspects that you guys can build?
Well, absolutely. I'm on the leadership team, so I do attend meetings every week with all the other leaders in the department, and I kind of just want to be a voice for the coaches. So it's nice to have a place at the table to kind of listen to what they're thinking. And to me, we've got such a new group. We've had a big change. And so I'm kind of that link from the past to kind of make sure they don't forget where we've come from and kind of reminding them that, this place is built on relationships and we got to continue to do that.
Yeah. How much time do you spend, if you had to guess, watching, your main passion of softball, the program that you built? How much time do you spend around the softball program?
Well, Randy, ironically, I'm the sport administrator for softball this year. So I attend definitely all of the games at home, and then I'm doing some traveling with them. But it's been a lot of fun to watch Caitlin and Lauren Lappin and Amber Freeman now as a hitting coach, to watch them progress. And, I'm really, really proud of them. They've really done a nice job, and we've got a big weekend ahead of us against Texas Tech. So Texas Tech's number 1 in the Big 12, and we're number 2. So it should be a really good indicator of where we're at right now at this point in the season. Yeah. How
ironic is that? 2 Sun Devils teaching hitting. Right, at the U of A. Yeah. Most people don't know that.
Yeah, no, they don't. They don't.
Yeah, so it's funny because obviously when you agreed to come on, this was huge for me, and I really appreciate it, by the way. And I had about a year ago, I had watched a podcast with Coach Walton, where he kind of talked about him watching a video, and your number happened to be on that video, and he went ahead and called you, and it was your office, and you picked up the phone. And it kind of reminded me of something else I had seen about what a lot of coaches and people in the game say about you, is that your willingness to share information and have conversations to mentor people. And I think you said something like that if you send me an email, you'll get a response. And so, a text message from myself, here we are. And, I talk about that a little bit and what that means to you about, what your responsibilities are, or maybe what you feel your responsibility is to help the younger people in the sport.
Sure. I came from a baseball background, so I had a lot of great mentors in junior college baseball. And, everything that I I kind of realized that my philosophy was bits and pieces from different people. And so if they wouldn't have given me the time to be able to talk the game and learn from them, then I probably would have struggled a lot more. And so when I got into the game, one of the things that I thought was a part of my duty was to make the game better, And so I was always very willing to share information because that's the baseball world. You go to the convention in baseball and everyone's sitting around in the lobby talking the game and learning from each other. And then when I got into softball, it was a little bit different. It was like they kind of held their cards close to their chest like they had secrets. And I'm going, wait a minute, we don't have secrets, and if we're going to grow the game, then we have to grow the information that's out there. And I really felt when I got into softball, the information was pretty bad. And it definitely needed someone to kind of say, you know what, let's try this or try this, and maybe you'll see that it's effective. And I basically coached softball like I coached baseball. And so when I took over the softball program, we were the first team to wear pants. So
really,
that's pretty amazing, right?
Yeah,
a trendsetter.
Yeah.
But I started doing coaching clinics and spoke around the country. And I really felt that was my duty. If a coach called me, then I'm going to spend some time and talk to them.
Did you ever feel like you got any pushback for that, like at the beginning?
Not really. I mean, I've never felt that way.
Or maybe you just didn't pay attention to it?
Probably not. Pretty focused on the task at hand. And, if someone calls me up or someone emails me, then I feel it's my responsibility to give them an answer. And so I'm still to this day. I mean, I had a guy yesterday send me an email of a kid swinging a bat and wanted my opinion. And I sent it right back to him, and I'm sure I don't even know who the guy is. I don't know where he's from, but if I can help someone, then I'm going to help them.
Gosh. And how does that make you feel when somebody does that still to this day?
Well, it's pretty humbling. I mean, I look back at my career. My career could have gone many different ways. I was a baseball coach, never thought about coaching softball, and actually got talked into it, And so my whole path of my journey in life kind of changed because a guy said, "Hey, Mike, I need your help." And I said, "George, what's that?" He goes, "I need you to coach the women's softball team." I go, "George, I don't want to coach women and I don't want to coach softball." And so I said, well, I'll try it for a year, and I did for a year, and we were pretty good, but I realized that, number one, I had to learn about the game of fast pitch softball. It was different than baseball, the shortness of it, the quickness of it. So I went out and watched the men's game to really kind of learn a little bit about what the game really looked like. But then I realized that if I went out and found a pitcher, that we could win the damn thing. And I went out and found Connie Clark. And the story about Connie, she former coach at Texas, but we won back-to-back championships, and then I got the opportunity to go to Arizona, and that was kind of it, And here I am, 40 years later, still at Arizona.
I mean, who would have thought that? Yeah. So take me back to that. So you said you were playing baseball right at Central, and you had an arm injury. Was that and you played? Did you play second base?
I played second base, shortstop. I had elbow surgery. I had Tommy John surgery before Tommy John.
I was going to ask you about that. Did you have some bad arm angles or something, or isn't that mostly a pitcher's thing?
Well, here's what happened. I mean, it was basically called Little League elbow.
Okay, overuse.
When I was in Little League, or when I played baseball, I pitched also.
Okay,
and played shortstop, and I was a pretty dominant pitcher in Little League, and I had a pretty good curveball. Well, that curveball probably was not being thrown correctly, and sure enough, it took a while for it to catch up to me. And then my sophomore year in junior college is when I started getting numbness in my hand and couldn't feel the ball. The ball was taking off on me, and sure enough, it was ulnar neuritis.
Yeah, and I read somewhere where you had dreams, or your plan was to go to play in the MLB.
Yeah, well, of course. I mean, growing up as a kid, I was blessed to follow my passion, and my passion was the bat and ball game. So I always tell people I was lucky because I lived my entire life on a baseball or softball field, But as a young kid, that's all I knew was, and all I wanted to know was baseball. And I really felt like someday I'd have a chance to play in the big leagues. I'm a diehard Yankee fan. I got a big Yankee room here that is Mickey Mantle was my hero, and started collecting back when I was 4 or 5 years old. And I have a pretty substantial collection of Mickey Mantle stuff right now. And so, yeah. And you know, I had the elbow surgery and couldn't play anymore. And so I was fortunate enough for Kenny Richardson to say, Mike, why don't you come coach with me? I think you'd be a good baseball coach. And I said, I would love to do it. So I ended up starting to coach baseball in 1976. We won the national championship, junior college national championship. And I thought, man, this is pretty cool. And so that was kind of the beginning of my coaching career. And then coached baseball from 76 to about 81, 82. In fact, my claim to fame was I coached my last year in baseball. I coached Tom Pagnozzi, who was an all-star catcher for the Cardinals, but I also coached his wife my first year in softball.
That is interesting.
Yeah, so I always told Tom he was the second best player in his family. You know,
in his family.
Colleen,
did they ever have any kids play?
They did. Yes, they did. In fact, Tom went on to play at Arkansas, and he has a kid that played at Ole Miss, but he still lives in Arkansas. But it was quite fun. I mean, there was one of the differences I really found coaching baseball at the junior college level was that every kid thought they were going to be in the big leagues, just like me, right? So they didn't quite take their academics seriously all the time, and they didn't realize that less than 1% was going to make it to the big leagues. So you better realize that there's going to be life after baseball. And when I got into softball, I kind of liked that because these kids had no habits. They were open-eared. I mean, anything you told them to do, they would do it. And they knew that softball was a foundation or a platform for them to learn how to be successful in life. And I kind of liked that. To me, as a teacher, I enjoyed watching young women grow up and be successful. And we never had to worry about professional sports because back then there was no professional softball. So it was a little bit different. I think much simpler back then than it is today. There wasn't travel ball to that extent. Kids weren't paying to play, and we weren't paying them to play, like today's world. So it was quite interesting.
Going back to CAC, you took the softball job, and then you mentioned you won a national championship in baseball, and then you switch over to softball, and then your last 2 years you won a national championship. Tell me about that, and tell me what those first couple years were like as you were navigating it, and then was there something that just switched, like an epiphany of some sort, or something that just clicked with your players that you kind of started to figure out how to win in the game of softball, aside from the pitching?
Yeah, I think it was quite obvious when I started coaching at Central that the fundamental base was completely different for them. And I always felt like no matter whether you're playing baseball or softball, I mean, throwing is throwing, fielding is fielding. So the fundamentals were the same. And I've always felt like the game of softball or baseball is the game of monotonous repetition of fundamental skills. So my practices were a lot of repetition, doing the things that we needed to be successful. And kids were getting better, and when kids get better, kids get more confident and they start enjoying the game a lot more. And truly, that was kind of what it was all about. I didn't know anything about pitching, so I had to go out and learn a little bit about that. And, that was probably the toughest thing, although I was a good recruiter and I was able to go out and recruit kids that could pitch. And at the junior college level, you didn't really have to develop them too much because if they could throw, they could throw, But in today's world, it's a lot different. You got to surround yourself with people that can develop players as well as recruit players. But I think that was my strength, was developing, and it was fun to watch those kids after they learned how to win. They never looked back because that became their standard. They expected to win. And we were just fortunate to win back-to-backs. And then got an opportunity to go to Arizona. And back then, there was only like 5 male coaches in the country. So it was a completely different landscape than it is today. And I'm just blessed that, God rest his soul, Cedric Dempsey, who passed away this past week, gave me the opportunity to come and coach at Arizona. And I remember my first day there. I go out to practice 2:30 and I walk out to the field, and it was just kind of a little rec field. It wasn't like what we have today. And there was a bunch of people on the field, and I go, "Hey man, we got practice at 2:30." And the guy goes, "Well, you're gonna have to wait until the PE class gets off your field." I'm going, "Oh my God, what did I do?" I came from a school that I had someone to drag the field, and softball was pretty big there, to thinking I'm going to the big leagues, Division I. And all I really wanted was an opportunity to get into Division I. And so I got a chance to build this program from the ground up. And it's surely fun to still be around and kind of see where it's come from.
Yeah, when you get there and you look around, like you said, there's people on your field, and you think you made it to the big leagues, and all of a sudden you had to kind of like reset yourself. Like, what was the first couple of things that you said, I've got to change, or I've got to adjust here?
Well, I had to change their work ethic, because they weren't used to working at the game. It was more of a social aspect of the game. So the work ethic was very important. And then the mindset of, hey, we're here to play for a championship. And I remember, telling those kids, we're going to win a national championship here, whether you're with me or not. And, it was really, kind of a balance between the physical part of the game, the mental part of the game, and then, teaching them how to handle failure, because softball, baseball is a game of failure. And I think that's probably one of the strengths that I had, was understanding that the best hitters are going to get a hit 3 out of 10 times. So I spent a lot of time teaching kids how to fail, but how to fail in a positive way, so that they didn't beat up on themselves, and made the game even tougher. And those were the fun things back then. It was, when I say from the ground up, I mean from the ground up. I had to drag my own field. I had to do everything, But the guy that I worked for at Central, George Young, 4-time Olympian, he said, "Michael, don't tell me what we don't have. Take what we have and do the best that you can." And that always stuck in my head, is I'm not going to complain about what I don't have. I'm not going to compare myself to anyone else. I'm going to take what I have and just dive in and do the best job that you can. And I think work ethic is a big part of my life, and always has been. Organization. I'm very organized, pay attention to detail, and I think the other thing is I kind of set a standard for those kids, and I would not waver from that standard. I would hold them accountable, to have the championship mindset. And if you go all in on the process, then the championships will take care of themselves. But that was early on. And then later on in my career, it was like, you know what, I got to do a better job of coaching the person first before I can coach the athlete.
I was going to ask you about that.
Yeah, I was good at coaching the athlete, but things have gotten a little more complicated now. And so I always tell people, I've coached men and women, and I always say men have to play good to feel good, women have to feel good to play good. And so I spent a lot of my time making young women feel good about themselves.
Yeah. Another thing that I know that you're pretty well known for is you, and you'd mentioned it a little bit, it was the mental side, and you mentioned how to, kind of navigating them through the failure. But what about the time before the failure, the big pressure moments, keeping things simple and easy? I've read about, and over the years I've read, and I've watched a lot of your videos. But what is one of the things that you would say really helped you let them be prepared for those big moments?
Well, I think you mentioned it right there, preparation. I think the more prepared people are, the more confident they are. And then it's a simple thing. I mean, it's like understanding what your body is telling you. And you get into pressure situations and things get fast on you. Probably your heart rate's going to speed up. Your breathing's going to get shallow. So getting kids aware of their body and in tune to their body and then give them routines that they can go through to kind of help get through that. That's one thing I love about golf, because golf is a very routine oriented sport. You can't skip a step, or else 1 inch here is going to be, 20 feet down the fairway. And so, I was fortunate to be around Harvey Dorfman, the mental game of baseball, Ken Revisa, Dr. Gene Williams, who was at Arizona, had a really solid sports psychology program. In fact, Jeff Jansen, who does a lot of work around the country now, Jeff was a graduate student when I first started at Arizona, and I gave him the laboratory to work with, So Jeff and I are still good friends. But yeah, the mental game is everything. I mean, you realize after a while you can have all the physical skills, but if you can't come through in those pressure situations, that's what it's all about. I mean, that's what championships are all about. And so being at your best when your best is needed is not an easy thing to do, but I think awareness is a big part of it, So getting kids to talk to you about how do you feel? How did you feel about that? And a lot of times it's just kind of losing control of the process.
What moments stick out to you when you look back? Like, I mean, I know you've probably been asked this 1,000 times, and to me, I hear relationships a lot, but like, give me a specific, whether it's a player or a situation that you really feel like it kind of made you either a better person or a better coach, something that helped you grow.
Well, there's a lot of things that helped me become a better person and helped me grow. I mean, sometimes just going through the trials and tribulations of not just softball, but life will allow you to either grow or you crumble. I mean, that's what life's all about. It's handling adversity. And so I've had many players that, I remember Jenny Dalton coming into my office one day and was just crying her eyes out that she couldn't play the game. And I'm going, Jenny, you're a damn All-American. You're going to be a 4-time All-American before you leave here. But she was putting so much pressure on herself because most of these young women are pleasers. They're trying to please someone, whether it's mom and dad or whether it's me. And I think that was the aha moment is, you know what? They're trying to please you, Mike, and so you have to be able to take the time to dissect what is going on with this young lady and help this young lady first to help herself. And then the game will kind of be the easy part of it. And so I've been through so much. When you lose a child, when you're in your second year of marriage and you don't have any insurance and, you've got a baby in a neonatal center and you're kind of seeing your life flash before you because you don't know how you're going to pay for all this, and thank God one of the strongest things that my mom gave me was my faith. And so I've leaned on my faith all the time and have gotten through some tough times. So, after losing a child, that kind of woke me up a little bit to say, you know what, this game is a game. It's not going to ever be life-threatening for me. Although I like to win. I'm competitive, so trying to find that balance was a very difficult thing for me in my life. I was very good at talking about it and preaching about it to others, but to live it, one of the most difficult things is when you're a coach at this level is you spend more time with other people's kids than your own, and so part of retirement was trying to get back some of those times. But yeah, it's tough. Anytime you're going to try to climb the mountain, there's going to be some falls along the way. And I think the Olympic team in 2004 was a big part of my life because they were kind of a safety net for me when I lost my wife, to a brain aneurysm. And I didn't realize how much I affected people, not just on that team, but around the world. In this game, this game was kind of bigger than I've ever seen before. And it took something like that to kind of bring it back and make you notice. Because as a young coach, I thought that the only way that I was successful is if I won a championship. So I would blow through the victories, and then the defeats would take chunks out of my body. I never celebrated the small victories.
When did you realize that?
Probably later on in my career, in probably in the 2000s. It was like, all right. I mean, the 90s were so good to me, and it was like almost a given that you were going to play for a championship, right? And then 2004 with the Olympic team, great moment. 2008, great team, great performance. We get beat 3-1 by Japan. We just ran into a hot pitcher. But at the end of the day, it was, I still can't get over that silver medal because the expectation is so high. And for me, it was gold or nothing, And man, I had to wake up one day and go, you know what? You can't keep living life that way. It's going to kill you.
Did it get dark?
It did. I mean, it was hard, because after 2008, there was a stretch there where we didn't get back to the World Series, and things weren't quite as easy as they used to be. And so you start realizing that there's other things that are important to you, or you better find things that are important to you other than the game. And I think that's when I kind of became a little more worldly about, finding some balance between my family and my profession and my faith. And that's when I think the generation kind of changed. I mean, in the 90s and the 80s, I mean, you tell a kid to run through a wall, they're going to run through the wall no matter how high it is, and they're not going to ask questions. And then we get into a moment where we've kind of enabled our athletes to have a voice, and rightfully so. I think it's a good thing. But it also, social media had made the game a little bit more difficult because now you're getting pot shots from people that don't even know you, don't know about the game, and don't have to face you, eye to eye. And that drove me crazy. Because, if I'm going to have a conversation with a kid that's got a problem, I'm going to do it in person. I'm not going to do it through a text message or on social media. And so that aspect was a little difficult for me to handle. And now that I sit back and I kind of look at the game, I wish, if there's one thing I could change, I wish it would be that, because I just think it's very unfair. And the problem is it affects kids. Whether we know it or not, these young ladies are pleasers. And once again, man, they start reading garbage about themselves and they start thinking that. And next thing you know, you've got some mental health problems that are real. And I think that's the one big thing today. Mental health to me back when I first started coaching was about performance based. It was about helping kids understand how to deal with pressure. Mental health today is about depression. I mean, it's about anxiety. It's about, not being able to cope with life. And to me, what a change that has been. And I think that's, if you look at youth sports and college athletics, that's a big part of the change. We've got 5 psychologists on staff. We didn't have any when I first got there. Then we had 1. But I mean, it's that rampant and probably 98% of our kids are using those services, whether it's performance-based or having some problems to deal with. But I mean, that's a real thing. And so sometimes we've got to watch what kind of expectations we're putting on kids today. And what I see is that there's such an investment today in developing youth. And it begins like 10 and under, 12 and under. Parents are investing in a travel ball team, which is good. I mean, I love travel ball teams, and there's some guys that I owe my entire career to, the Mike Stiths of the world and Dave Mercados and Larry Mays. I mean, the Fawcett's, Dean Fawcett, Gary Fawcett. I mean, some really good people. And back then it was, you just admired the way they handled the kids because they cared about them. They developed a kid as a person. They got them ready for college, but they taught them how to play the game the right way. And I think sometimes today when I look at what's going on, I don't know how much these kids are really learning. There's still some really good travel ball teams and programs, but there's a lot of them that are just, you're going to pay me for uniforms. You're going to pay me to part of your program. You're going to pay me for lessons. It's a drain on parents. And so at the end of the day, the parents have invested so much money into their kids, they feel like they've already earned the scholarship, right? They've already paid for it. And unfortunately, that's not always the case. And so that's one of the differences I see right now. It's just the pressures on kids to get to a school. And sometimes they overshoot their boundaries where they're at the wrong place, where they just want the name, and the next thing you know, they're not happy and they're somewhere else. And then we throw in the transfer portal now. Name, image, and likeness is a good thing. I think we should have always shared with our athletes with the revenue. But today it's getting to be like, are they chasing a college degree, and a college experience, or are they chasing a bag of money?
Right. They're no longer playing for the team and the program. They're playing for themselves and for what they get.
Absolutely.
Let me ask you this: do you think that, and you mentioned the mental health part, and also, and when it comes to like social media, is that just because there's no longer a safe space? It's, their safe space, what should be their alone time, their private time, or the time with their families, literally they're just still connected and they can still read everything, what people are saying, what the score was, what the box score said, what ranking they're not a part of. You think that's all of it?
I think that's a big part of it. I mean, we are in a information. Information is so easy to get to. And
overload.
It's a powerful thing, but sometimes you don't know if the information is good or not. That's the bad part. And so, I think they never do have that time when they get away from things. And I think about myself. Hell, I'm going to be 70 years old, but the first thing I do is I look at this, and just to check in to see what I missed. And I'm sure the kids are 10 times worse than that. And so, life has gotten difficult. I always say when I grew up, I would go to school, I would walk to school, I would come home and I had to do my homework before I could get on my bike and go down the street and play with my friends and play baseball. And that was the carrot for me, was being able to go play with my buddies. And today you drive around in the parks, there's no one in those parks, number one. Number two, there's just so much pressure on kids to be in an organized setting, and I think about myself, the way I learned how to play the game, I emulated TV. I watched baseball on black and white TVs, watched Mickey Mantle, watched Willie Mays, Joe Morgan. All those guys. And you saw a swing and emulated it. That's how you learned how to play. Never took any golf lessons. I emulated Jack Nicklaus and Arnold Palmer. And I think today we're just so structured. And sometimes that can be good and can be bad. And now we've taken up even a notch more now with all the analytics. A kid takes a swing and they're looking at the screen. They're not learning the game. They don't have a feel. I have to feel what it's like to be able to move the runner from second to third by staying inside the ball and going to the right side. And
that swing looks probably a lot different than what you want it to be when you're going to drive a ball, to center field in the air, or, try to square a ball up. It feels different. It feels wrong. And when we try to practice it a bunch, but well, and you mentioned too that that the 2000s got difficult. How much of that do you think was you sharing information, you helping grow the game? And I'm not saying you're taking credit for it, but I think you're probably had a little bit to do with that, and then just the growth of the entire game and how much better everybody was getting.
That's one thing that's I'm I'm glad that I got to live through is the transition of our game. And our game's gotten so much better from the parity from coast to coast, the way the game's taught. The athletes are bigger, stronger, quicker. Softball is such a good game to watch. And the reason why I always say is because I feel like our women play the game at the same level as the men do in baseball. And there's some sports you can't really say that. And that's one thing that's always driven me is, man, these young ladies are really good at what they do. And what we're seeing now is I think back in the 80s and 90s, we had a handful of really good, the Lisa Fernandez's of the world. She's one of the best that's ever played the game. But there wasn't as many. It seemed like there was a lot of pitchers. When I go back, I think of Fernandez and Dee Dee Wyman and Heather Compton and Susie Parra and Debbie Day, and the list goes on and on and on. Today, the hitters have gotten so much better, and I think a lot of it's because of the equipment. I'm not so sure that our game has outgrown our fields, where I think our fences at the Division I level need to be moved back. I think would be good. I love the
What do you
international.
think? To what? What?
I love the international game because it was 225 all the way around and 220 or 225. But anyway, it put a premium on outfield play.
Yes.
So it brought
Triples.
back the triples, right?
Yep.
And you have to have outfielders that could cover ground and play the game. And then you don't have any cheap home runs that are hit. I watched college games today, and you see a pop-up, and it goes out.
Colorado.
Oh, well, yeah. One good thing about Utah, at least they moved their fences back. But I went to BYU with our team a couple weeks ago. Their fences are the same as ours, and the altitude's a little different. But so, yeah, I think we've just got we've done such a good job of growing the game, developing the game. And I really give all that credit to our travel ball coaches have gotten better at teaching the game. And, I admire that. And then you look at the colleges, there's a lot more colleges that are playing the game now. For 20 years when I was coaching, the SEC wasn't around. Then all of a sudden you bring the SEC in to play baseball, softball. It's a real deal because they take that football money and they're going to be good at it. So the demands for athletes are a lot different. Back in the day, we had a stronghold on Southern California. Now you look at Southern California, or they're going to go all over the place. You're going to find them at Michigan. You're going to find them all over. And so I think that's a great part of our game. It's grown. I think the Olympics in '96 kind of helped do that, made the game grow a little bit, and then television. If we really want to thank someone, thank ESPN for the growth of our sport because they have been a big part of that. And so each and every year that the World Series is on and Beth Moen and Michelle Smith and Jessica Mendoza, man, that's like watching, for me, Dizzy Dean and Pee Wee Reese back in the day. They have lived through it and they've helped us grow the game.
Yeah. Do you go to the World Series games since you've been retired?
I went to them when I was coaching. I will go there, when Arizona's there. I don't know if I'd rather sit on my couch and watch them and listen to them if we're not involved there because you miss a lot. But yeah, I still, it's a great event. I've watched that place grow. That stadium has, tripled in size. And so if you look at all the things, you can see the growth of our sport. And so I think that's why softball is part of the discussion when it comes to revenue share. Beginning next year, we're sharing $20.1 million with our student athletes. And basically, it's going to be the sports that bring in revenue or the sports that are going to share in the revenue. Well, I think in most places, it's going to be football, men's basketball, women's basketball. And then it'll be, I think, baseball and softball.
In that order?
Softball and baseball.
Yes. Yeah, that's what I was thinking.
But yeah, unfortunately, we've underestimated our growth and we've made our facilities too small. I think, like at Arizona, we sell out. We can hold 3,000, but I think if we had 4,000 or 5,000 seats, we could put people in them too. I think, but so there's so many different things that you can lean on to see why this sport has just exploded. And the last piece of it is we need a viable professional league. And I think Athletes Unlimited has the right idea, and I'm really happy this summer because Kim will do a great job as a commissioner. I think it's got a chance of really exploding a little bit, but we need to watch our kids play the game at 27, 28, 29 years old. Because back in the day, they'd play through college and they were done. Well, you know what? The average age on the Olympic team in 2004 was 27.
Really?
And so, and so you're getting a kid that is, absolutely has emotional stability. They understand the game physically, mentally, and emotionally. They know how to compete. They're just smarter about the game, more prepared. They have a bigger database because they've done it more times. And so I'm excited about the opportunities and hope Athletes Unlimited can make it work. And then we've got to grow the sport in other places besides the United States. And, I've spent the last 3 summers in Italy working with the Italian national team. And the trouble that you have back in Europe is that most of those European countries don't have athletics in their schools. So it's just a club type thing. Yeah. So I think once we can grow it all over the world. There's some places that are very good, Australia and Japan and China, Japan especially. Outstanding. But it's their national pastime, right? So I think that's going to be our next step is being able to get back on the Olympic program and get back on it forever. And luckily, we've got LA coming up. We'll be on the program. And then the next one is in Australia, which we should be on the program. And then it depends on where the next one is.
Yeah, I want to go back to you talking about the average age of the Olympic team at 27 and your thought process of they need to play into their mid to late 20s in some type of professional league. I had Stacey May on some episodes back. And by the way, I met her at a travel ball tournament talking about a player. And when I went back and did some research on her, I did not realize the type of player and hitter that she was. But she said the same thing, that she didn't really develop until after college, and then she just kept getting better and better. She said her body started to break down, of course, but the game was there. So that'll be an interesting thing. Do you think that? Do you really think that Athletes Unlimited can do it with? Are we going to need some sort of backing somehow? Are we going to need what? How do we speed that process up?
Yeah, well, you asked my opinion. I think we do need backing, and I think my initial thought would be MLB. If we could ever get MLB to back us, then I think we could make it work, just like the WNBA. Without the NBA, the WNBA wouldn't be around, and so I'm hoping that this will be a step in the right direction. I thought the format of Athletes Unlimited the past few years was interesting to watch, but I didn't like that they were changing teams all the time, where this summer they're going to actually have 4 teams that are going to stick together. But yeah, the maturity level, it takes time. You think about, you look at Rory McIlroy and probably 5 years or 6 years ago, he wouldn't have won that because he wasn't as emotionally stable as he is today. And I think as you get older, you get a little more smarter of what kind of thoughts need to go into your mind to help you perform. And I always told kids that, that you do repetition in the game. And when you're doing repetition, you build a database. And the more games you play, the bigger your database becomes. And the great thing about our game is you not only have to have a big database, but you got to be able to draw the right card to the top of the deck when you need it, because you have to react. You can't think about it. And so I think I always look at it as the longer you can play in this game, the more games you play, the larger your database becomes, and you should be able to handle the game a little bit differently. That's, if there's one thing that I would say about the Olympic team, well, two things. One, great teammates. So they understand the game. They understand that you're going to have to be a role player sometimes, but you have to be a good teammate. The other one is emotional stability. Those kids never got too high, never got too low. And it was so much fun to work with them because they were so good at what they did. You had to constantly challenge them or else they'd get bored. Right? And I think part of the problem is sometimes we have young kids that don't have the skill set yet. We challenge them and they get frustrated. So I think that balance is really important,
I've heard you say that a few times now, even in just our conversation. You talk about the emotional stability, but I actually wrote that down a few, like I said, about a year ago, that you said that the players on the Olympic team were emotionally stable and good teammates, and that's a quality that you've kind of pieced together as something that's really important when it comes to competing at a high level.
Yep, and they had great eyes too. So if it's a hand-eye coordination bat and ball game. You can't fool the eyes, and every one of those kids had really good eyes. But what a treat, and something I will never forget is my time with USA Softball and representing our country, and just being able to be a part of watching our greatest athletes prepare and play the game. And I wish they could have made a lot more money because they deserved a lot more money back then. But money's always been a challenge, and so it'll be interesting to see in the college game what happens. You look at this week and you got a guy making $2.4 million at Tennessee, and he's going to now start testing the waters. He wants $4 million. And I don't know if I like that part of it. I think that's what pro sports were all about. I love the college experience because there is going to be life after baseball or softball or anything else. So a good education. And the other thing is being an alumni that you can have friends and associates from for a lifetime. And that's the part they're going to miss. When you're in the transfer portal and you go to 4 different schools, what school are you going to, where are you going to be an alum at, or are you going to be an alum? And so I think that's another big part of it that I think we're kind of getting away from and missing.
Yeah, I see that in travel ball too. You get kids that leave their senior year, they go do something else, and then they come back in the summer and they don't have really a home to go to. I mean, they're always welcome at, like, I always welcome anybody that wants to come work out or pick up games in the summer, but like, it's really not their home. And I see that, and that's probably not as big of a deal, but I completely agree with that. I want to talk to you a little bit about, you're kind of like one of the pioneers in innovation and technology. And I want to tell you a quick story. So about 5 or 6 years ago, might have been like 2018 or 19. So it's probably a little longer. I wanted my whole organization to start to understand that, like, I mean, we all know if you hit, you play. Like, there's other things that are super important, but you got to be able to hit. And hitting and teaching hitting and understanding, to simplify things is super important. So I had a friend of mine, his name is Victor, and he introduced me to Right View Pro. And so I wanted to have this big seminar. We rented out this big building, and I set up this big projector, and we brought Right View Pro and Rapsodo, and we set everything up on a Pro Batter, a machine that will, I think they call them home bases too.
Yeah.
And so I set this big thing up, and I tried to show all of my teams and their families your videos from Right View Pro on how to get people ready, or how to, the fundamentals, the basic language of getting ready and then swinging. And it was really hard to get people to understand. Number one, I think just because the video, was from whenever it was. When was that?
Way back.
Yeah, way back, right? But the other part, I just don't know if they were ready for it. Is that? I wanted to ask you, is that still in play? That has hitting changed that much, or is all that stuff still in your opinion, important?
Well, I think there's a lot of it that's very relevant. Here's the thing about Right View Pro, and Don Slott is a mastermind behind that, and I think the way he changed our game is it was the first time I think in our game that there was a common language when you were teaching hitting, and so that for me helped expedite the learning process. Because I always ask kids, why do you do what you do? Why do you throw the way you throw? Why do you hit the way you hit? And if they can't connect the dots, then how are they going to make adjustments? They can't. And I think Right View Pro kind of gave us the dots that we needed to be able to get kids to understand the importance of, being in the proper posture, being connected, transferring your weight. I mean, has hitting changed? No. Verbiage around the country, I'm sure, is a little bit different. But I think the analytics has kind of changed the approach to, would I prefer to have an out on the ground or would I prefer to have an out in the air? I mean, that's up to someone else. I still think fast pitch softball is played on the ground, but I do think that there's times, especially now with the equipment being so good, and there's certain hitters that I would prefer them flying out, than hitting a ground ball and hitting a double play, But I don't think the mechanics has changed. I think everyone has their own little thing about hitting, right? And I think that the key is that you have to have, I think, a consistent language with all of your players so that they know when you say something, it means something, versus we're kind of grabbing things out of the air. And next thing you know, there's more confusion that's going on. So I think Right View Pro did a hell of a job in that regard. And if you ask me, I think hitting hasn't changed.
I agree. And I was just going to say, and I was more talking about the swing itself, maybe not Right View Pro as much, but just so, I still use the same, stance negative positive. And I talk to my hitters about that. And if if we're going to do a drill, hey, we're going to do these first 5 from ready, and so like I've been trying to do that and get most of the kids that I work with kind of in that mindset. And it's funny because I just had a kid over that was new and they were blown away that there was actually some breakdowns to those different movements. And it was interesting. I always wondered that. And what got me thinking of that too was you kept using the word database. And I remember hearing, you got to have files in the database to react. And so no, I'm all about that. That was good stuff. Is that something that's still in play? Is that still?
I think Don sold the company. I think it's still around. I'm not so sure. I haven't been working with any hitters for the last 3 or 4 years, other than video clips, that come my way.
Yeah.
But now it's time for guys like you to do that, and I do appreciate what you've done in your program, and you should be very proud of the stability that you've brought to a organization, and I think that's a big part of it. If I think about one thing with the Gary Hannings and Larry Mays, it was the stability and the caring that they had for kids, and I think that you can't never lose that because that's going to take you a long ways, and how you treat kids is very important. I think you've always done a good job of that.
Thank you. I appreciate that. I try to stay consistent with them and with my message and even just my demeanor and behavior. And, I watch guys like you on the field and how you conduct yourself. And, there's moments to get fiery, but the kids know like you got their back. And so to me, that's always been something. I wanted to ask you one more thing before we shut down here. Give me a little bit of like a reflection on like where you're at now in life and just looking back on like, your perspective on where you sit and just in life in general, like where are you at as you reflect on your whole journey?
Well, I'm very happy. where I sit right now. I think if there's one thing that is I'm still trying to get my arms around is how quickly it's passed. It's like I never ever dreamed that I would be sitting here pushing 70 years old, and I'm going, where did the time go? I don't feel 70. I don't act 70. But you know what? Time goes by, and I think a lot of it is because I was following my passion. I had a lot of fun. But I'm in a good place right now. I mean, I always tell people every day's a Saturday because I can decide what I want to do, and so I'm not fully retired. I'm 1 foot in, 1 foot out. And that's been kind of good because I do like being around young people and athletes, and it keeps you young. But on the other hand, I'm able to do some things that I want to do, and time has slowed down a little bit. I say it's slowed down, but sometimes I wonder whether it's really slowed down, but it has. I mean, every day I seem like I have more time to be able to do things that I want to do versus, running to your calendar and looking at your schedule and going, I'm going from here to here to here to here to here. Day's over, Now I get to enjoy my wife a little bit, have some nice dinners together, get to watch the Yankees on TV at night, and like I said, become a spectator, watch and a fan. And I love the game. I love the game being played at a high level. And so I'm very proud of Caitlin and what she's done with our program. And she's a good communicator, a good teacher, does things the right way, treats people the right way. And I'm kind of waiting to see how we navigate the next phase of this college athletic modern college model. It's like, to me, it's kind of frightening, but who knows? I'm sure we will navigate it, but it's different when you're paying kids, because I think that adds more pressure on them. If I'm paying you $1 million a year, boy, now things have changed a little bit.
How do you think you would have handled the 25 scholarship situation if you were to get all those? That seems like more of a nightmare?
Yeah, I there's no way I would keep 25 kids on my roster, because you can't keep them all happy. And I think I always felt like if you can't contribute to our success, then why are you in the uniform? At the end of the day. So I love rosters of about 15 and 18 at the most. But again, back then I didn't have 8 pitchers on my staff like they have right now.
Yeah.
It's starting to look like a baseball team. But yeah, I don't know. I mean, just because they have 25 doesn't mean you have to use 25.
Yeah.
Just because they give you 20 hours a week to practice doesn't mean you have to practice 20 hours a week.
Did you?
I was probably sometimes, certain times of the year, like probably in the fall, closer to the 20-hour rule, but when we're playing during competition, we never got to 20 hours because we're off on Mondays. We're a light practice on Tuesdays, kind of a review on Wednesdays, and then we play Thursday, Friday, Saturday, or Friday, Saturday, Sunday. So the routine becomes a little bit different. But during the fall, I love doing a lot more individual work. I mean, that was one of the things I miss, is kind of breaking down the game. And I love practice. I was a practice coach.
I've been looking for a coach, just so you know.
Yeah, you're right. Yeah. But
I got one more question for you. If you could go back and whisper some advice to you, the younger you at Central and your early days in Arizona, what would it be?
Enjoy the small victories would be one. That's for sure. Trying to find a little bit of balance in my life. One thing that I did wrong is, and I'm not saying wrong, but it made things more difficult, is I commuted from Casa Grande because I was at Central, took the job here, commuted for 21 years here.
Oh, wow. I didn't know that.
Yeah. So you think about it, that's 2 hours a day in the car, lost time. And back then at the beginning, we didn't even have cell phones, so I couldn't make recruiting calls. But if I could have taken something back, I probably would have moved the family to Tucson quicker. in sooner, but my wife had a job in Casa Grande that she loved, and I thought the right thing to do was let her keep her job. But I would have done that, and then probably try to find a little more time to get away from the game and spend time with my own kids. I mean, Michael played baseball, and Michelle played softball until she was in 8th grade, and then she, too much pressure, decided not to play. But I wouldn't change much, I mean, I look back now, the only thing I miss right now at this stage of my life is that all the people that I knew are passing away. And like Lute Olson and Dick Tomey and Jerry Kindle. I mean, none of them are around anymore. And that's the scary part.
That must have been a cool time, sitting in there chatting with Lute and
I had
Dick Tomey.
My locker was next to Lute. Dick and I were really good friends. We played golf every Friday morning. Played 9 holes before we came to work. Great mentors. Jerry Kindle was the biggest gentleman I've ever known. I remember going up to ASU and watching an ASU U of A baseball game, and we got robbed on a call at the plate, and they called us out, and I swear the runner was safe. And if it was me, I probably would have been in that umpire's face. I mean, I know how I was, but Jerry came out and he was just had this conversation with the umpire like a gentleman and walked away, and it's like, wow. But he was a very spiritual man, and definitely missed him and Jim Wing. I don't know if you remember the name Jim Wing, but Jim was an assistant for Jerry Kindle and just a tremendous baseball guy. Rich Allday, another one from Pima Community College. So, yeah, I've lost a lot of friends, and, I never had to think about that for a long time. So now when I see people, I tend to look at it in a different light.
A little more intentional?
Much more intentional.
Well, Coach, it's been really a pleasure of mine to have you on. This has been awesome, more than I could ever imagine. I can't wait to get it out there. And like I told you, it's going to be number 50. So huge milestone for me, halfway through my goal of 100. And I couldn't think of a better person to have on. So I appreciate your time.
My honor. And keep doing what you're doing. You're making a difference. You're making a difference every day. I always say get 1% better every day, and life's good.
We're trying.
All right, man.
All right. I just want to say thanks for listening. We will continue working to elevate the sport and get caught up with those who are influential in the fast pitch community, and hopefully help you navigate your softball journey. If you enjoyed this content, please like and subscribe to our YouTube channel, Caught Up with Randy Kaye, handle @CoachKAZ. Listen to the audio version of our podcast on Google, Apple, Spotify, or wherever you consume your favorite content. Finally, please follow us on X and Instagram using the handles @CoachKAZ. Thanks for watching.
This one's for my wife. Could have left 1,000 times just about my side.